The fire service is a lifestyle. Some of us grew up knowing that this is what we would do. Others found it later in life. We all have a story to tell. We live a career of experience and knowledge. But what happens when we retire? All that knowledge and experience walks out the door. Welcome to Capture the Knowledge. Hello Metro Fire, Jeff Malinowski here. This time I'm sitting down with Tim Barnes, who was our engineer at 53A shift for 6 years?
6 years.
6 years. Tim just retired, and I wanted to get him before he moves out to Colorado. He sold his house in Lincoln, and now he's heading out in about a month to live out of state and go hiking and do everything else.
Enjoy retirement.
Yeah, so congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming in to join me on Capture the Knowledge.
You're welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. You're the first person that I've talked with sitting in these chairs from 06-1.
You make me feel old.
You pushed through several years at busiest stations in our district. If you could just give a little background on how we started here at Metro, how you started here at Metro.
Well, when we got hired, we were hired for the paramedic intern program. So at that time, the first year of employment was basically just going through the ARC paramedic program. At the end of the internship, if I recall, we finished up the National Registry 1 week, and the next Monday started the academy. So that was kind of the start. Out of the academy, I did probation at Station 24. Was pretty busy at that time, not like it is now, but working Medic 24 is working Medic 24. At the end of probation, went out to 62 for a year, and came back to 24, was at 24 for another year. Floated around the pool for a little while, ended up out at 111. Stayed at Medic 111 until I was able to get an engine bid at 51, which was a great spot. Had a lot of fun there with D-Ray before I got promoted engineer. And promoted engineer, got assigned to 61. The next 3-year bid got outbid at 61, so I went back to 24, drove at 24 for a year. At that time, was able to go back to 61, stayed the remainder of that year, remainder of that 3-year bid at 61, then went down to 53 and stayed at 53 until I retired. Was kind of resistant at first because I know you kept trying to get me down to 53 and wasn't having it at that time, but then when I went down there, that's where I finished my career. It was a great time.
As an engineer, when did you promote to engineer?
I promoted to engineer, it was 2013. So it was March of 2013. So I spent the last 9 years of my career as an engineer. It's a great position. I feel we've done a lot of work to kind of add to what the engineer is expected to do. I believe when I got hired, the role of the engineer was kind of just one of those where you truly just drove to the fire and put the engine in the pump, and that was it. And then now I would like to think that we expect a lot more out of our engineers. With a 3-man engine company, we can do a lot as long as the engineer is engaged and working hard for that first, especially for that first 5-10 minutes of a fire.
So while we're talking about engineers, I think that's how a lot of people know you as an engineer.
Yeah.
You've put in a bunch of time. What else have you done for the engineer rank? Because a large part of the changes that we've seen in the engineer rank, you've been a part of.
Well, thanks. I'd like to think that had at least some influence, but I know there's a lot of people that were working. We're all working towards a common goal at that point. So I think you're right. As a firefighter, I really didn't do much except for show up to work, do my shift, and then go home. As an engineer, I've been a little bit more involved. When I was testing for engineer, I was unsuccessful the first couple times and kind of felt in my own mind, and this is just myself, it has no reflection of the greater Metro or fire service, but I felt that I was trying to do this on my own. I didn't feel like there was any help given from the district. Pretty much the common convention was, work with your engineer and he'll get you through it. If your engineer wasn't too motivated to help you, you were kind of on your own. So when I promoted engineer, I kind of felt like it would be hypocritical if I didn't give back to to try to correct that and try to make changes. So I got involved with the testing, the engineer testing cadre soon after I finished probation as an engineer. And then I also got involved with the EVOC program with Kelly Tassoni. Been instrumental with that, and that of course evolved from where it was, which really wasn't a whole lot that we did for the EVOC 10 years ago or 9 years ago, until now. Of course, every academy goes out and has an extensive EVOC program. The probationary firefighters do the driver's license endorsement testing, as well as an accident investigation team. So got a little bit involved with all of those aspects for the EVOC program, as well as the engineer testing and engineer probation for a long time. When I first started with the probation and the testing, it seemed like we had kind of a changing of the guard, and there was not a whole lot of people that were involved with the testing at that point. From putting it together, what should we do, how should we manage with that? In fact, I can remember kind of being in a room one point and there was 3 people, and they said, all right, we need 3 leads for pre-trip, driving, and pumping. And you were already doing the driving. Mike Martin was already doing the pre-trip, so they kind of looked at me and went, there's 1 spot left and there's 1 person in the room.
It's a great time, and it's really important because I think for years, as you said, the engineer rank didn't get a lot of specific training. You were a large part of the push to improve that. In your mind, what makes a good engineer?
A lot of times we think of what does the engineer do when we think about a structure fire. And of course the engineer is responsible for getting us there safely, putting the engine and pump, supplying water for the attack lines, all the lines that are needed. A lot of times we think that's what an engineer does. I like to think of outside of that base level there, that the engineer does whatever is needed. If there's going to be a delay and there's no truck on scene, truck's going to the roof to vent, most likely on a structure. So if there's time, throw in a ladder. Anytime we go into an IDLH situation without a known rescue, we want a 2 outline. So why not? So there's things that the engineer can do. If there's time, we can throw that 2 outline on the ground. We can help the firefighter get irons to the front door. If there's a need for a circ saw, we can get that to the front door. There's a lot of things that can be done just by knowing what has to happen on the fire ground. So I think that's important, but there's also a lot of other times that we don't really think about. If you're running a vehicle accident on the freeway, what is the engineer doing there? My thought is the engineer should be the safety officer, parking the engine in the right spot, setting cones out so the work area is safe for us, making sure we're keeping an eye on traffic, keeping an eye on the dangers that are happening on the freeway. Same thing with vehicle fires. If the vehicle fire is on the freeway, that adds a whole nother level of safety and anxiety and problems that are created that the engineer can help out a lot for. But even medical aids. We always think, oh, the medical aid, you park next door, address goes to the medic. Not all of our medical aids are in houses, especially nowadays. A lot more on the side of the road or in a field or somewhere. So there's a lot that can be done if the engineer is engaged, parking correctly, angling the engine so that the crew gets out safely, not into traffic. So there's a lot that the engineer can do, but a lot of it depends on how well you're engaged and to what level you're thinking about what's important. And for me, number 1 importance was always the safety of my crew, every single time. I would always tell the firefighters in the beginning, if we're showing up to an incident, and if it's, say, a vehicle accident, I would tell the firefighter, me personally, I'm going to be putting cones out, setting up safety for the scene, but if they need me for patient care, that might trump what I'm doing, so let me know.
What have you noticed from new engineers over the course of your time? You've done a bunch of training with new engineers. What patterns have you seen that new engineers could work on early on to get up to speed as quickly as possible?
It's always tough when answering that question, because captains and firefighters, they see newer engineers a lot more than I do. Because as an engineer, if I go work at a station, that means there's probably no other new engineer, or there might be the engineer on the truck that you're seeing for that day. So a lot of what I get is either hearsay or just the trends that we're seeing, you know, the EVOC reports, those kind of things. But one of the biggest things I think, when you're a brand new engineer, there's that little pucker factor the first time you show up. You realize, oh, I don't have a safety net, it's all me right now. Right. And I think that becomes even more when you know that the captain was not an engineer or the captain was not as engaged with the engineer rank. So a lot of times right in the beginning, brand new engineers are, because they're on edge a little bit, they tend to perform at a higher level than they do, say, maybe 3 or 6 months later. It seems a little counterintuitive, but as I get more familiar and more comfortable with my job, I tend to relax more. And the EVOC report tend to bear that out, because a lot of times 4 to 6 months after we promote a bunch of engineers, we tend to start seeing a spike in vehicle incident reports. Engineers are a little more comfortable now, they're not quite as attentive, and they're not as on edge, so there's a little more relaxing time. Yeah. So there's a part of me that goes, one of the best things you can do is, as you start to get more comfortable, pay attention to that fact that you're not as experienced as you think you are. Not that you're not as good as you think you are, but you're not as experienced as you think you are, so you still need to be on edge. I always said, come down, drive at 53, because they're the worst drivers in the district.
And we've also talked about if you drive at 53, and you know, we have a bunch of parts of our district that are very similar with the drivers and more challenging driving and calls, that we could make the entire engineer exam out of a drive with a lot of distracted drivers in front of us and a dynamic pumping scenario like a dump fire or something like that.
53 is a good place to drive. All the crews, whether it's city crews, whether it's metro crews, all the crews down there know that it's very competitive in the area, and there's not a lot of time between showing up first in, second in, third in, and so on. So the crews tend to drive a little more aggressive, and it's tougher to keep that safety factor in mind, knowing that I want to get there first or second, but I also want to get there safely. You couple that with the volume of calls, running 4, 5, 6 calls after midnight, or 10 calls after midnight. Mm-hmm. Then, you know, we always think about, what about that 4 a.m. call when you get to the structure fire? Well, 4 a.m., it's a little bit easier to drive because there's not as many people on the road. After you've had 9 or 10 calls and now it's 8:30, 9 a.m., and you pull out of the station and you see a column and it's rush hour traffic and you've been up all night and haven't slept, you really need to kind of in the back of your mind go, I need to slow down just a little bit and put everybody's safety in mind. So I think for that reason, it can be a good place to drive. It's very challenging, that's for sure.
And I think we could say very similar things about 41's area, 24's, 23, 109.
Yeah.
You've got schools, you've got all kinds of reasons for traffic and things to watch out for. And that's tough.
Right. It is.
After all those calls, especially with all the mandatories we're seeing these days.
Yeah. The fire service is changing. You know, we talk about working the medic. Yes, I've worked a couple years on Medic 24. For half that time, I had a BLS partner that really did not tech calls. So I was doing all the calls. You're on probation, you're doing the reports, you're doing all that. I get it. To me, that doesn't seem as bad as what the medics are getting now with the wall times, with the increased call volume.
What would you say to the folks who are on medics right now, who are dealing with the wall times and the high call volumes? And now we're seeing ALS, BLS, which is great. Culturally, I think we're heading in the right direction with our BLS folks doing more of the teching calls and that kind of thing. From your experience, though, what would you like to pass on?
I always had a different perspective on the medic, I think, than most people have had. Because we were hired as paramedics, I always felt the district paid me to become a paramedic. The district paid for my paramedic school, my paramedic program. I have a job and I have a career solely because the district put me through paramedic school. I always tried to remember that. So when it was taking that 5th or 6th abdominal pain to the hospital, you're grumbling and pissed off with the world and just angry, I always tried to remember that I wouldn't be doing this if the district hadn't paid for me to go through and have this experience. Not saying it was rosy and it was great. But that always kind of in my mind kind of gave me the sense of going, okay, I'm here because I chose to be here. And I do think even on the medic, I think that this is a great career, and you're not on the medic forever. You know, there will be a time when you spend more time on a suppression apparatus and a suppression unit. But I think the biggest thing for me that I always tried to, if there were little things I could do at the station, I would try to encourage this, and just by leading by example of doing whatever I could to take the pressure and take the workload off of the medic crew. When I was on Medic 24, we had the ISRM Medic 224. So when it got busy, that meant they took Engine 24 out of service and staffed ISRM 224. So it was almost always that we were listening on the radio, and we knew that if it got busy, if it was at all possible, we would go available on Medic 24 to keep our engine back in service. The flip side of that would be there would be times when it would be real busy. There was no way the engine company could call dispatch and take us out of service, because if they took us out of service, they would just activate ISRM 224 and our engine company would be in service. Mm-hmm. So it really kind of defeated the purpose of trying to take us out of service for dinner. That just didn't happen. But the engine company, I can remember numerous times, we'd pull back in the station. The engine company, it was the captain and the firefighter who was the paramedic. They would strip our gear off the medic, throw their gear on the medic, and the medic would stay in service. And there was, more often than not, they would get a call. So I'd be in the station eating dinner, assigned to Medic 24, as Medic 24 goes off and runs a call while we're eating dinner. That kind of solidified to me of what it meant to take care of your crew. And I know especially at 53, it's the little things. If there's something needs to be done around the crew, I don't expect the probie to do it. I don't expect the new guys to do it. I don't expect the guy on the medic to do it. That should be stuff I'm doing. If it's late at night, you're looking around at the dishwasher going, well, the probie should be doing that. No, the probie's on the medic. The probie's probably going to, if he's lucky, he's going to get 5 or 10 minutes at the station to get a moment to decompress and unwind. So I think it truly is about helping each other out and making the crew know that we are a crew. It's not an engine company and a medic company. No, this is a crew. We are one. And I'll do what it takes. And yes, Engine 53 is busy. It's nothing like working Medic 53.
In your mind, what is the core of the fire service? Or have you already talked about it?
The core of the fire service, and let me step back, because I think most everybody knows that my dad volunteered here, was a reserve for 40 plus years. Mm-hmm. So I grew up knowing that the fire department was where everything happened. If there was a Christmas party, it was happening at the fire hall at what's now Station 116. If there was Boy Scout meetings, they were held at the fire hall. The community revolved around the fire department. And that was kind of the way that I grew up. So when you look at it now, and if you come by 53 and you hear him when he comes by the station, retired Captain Scotty McKinney will always talk about taking care of your people, taking care of the community. He deeply cares about the people in 53's area, even though he's been retired for a number of years at this point. The fire service is losing a bit of that because we don't live in the community that we work in. There's very few Metro employees that live in Metro's area. So to help out the community, we have to do what we can. Part of that helping out our community is our brothers and sisters in the fire service. And I think that's the way it is. We hear all the time about when tragedy strikes one of our own, how overwhelming the response is of people taking somebody back and forth to a medical appointment, or they're helping the meal train, trying to take somebody food, or they're taking care of somebody's lawn. To me, that's what it's about. Not only is it about the people that we work with and we're employed to be brothers and sisters with, but it's also about the people in the community. Yeah, we see people on their worst days, and it's easy, and we've all been there. I've done it too. There's been many conversation in our own little office in the engine, you know, complaining about this, bitching about that, really not having a good time of it. But when it comes down to it, we're here to help people, and that's what we do. And I think that's why we're willing to do what we do. And to use Fulcher's phrase, that's what we get paid for, what we're willing to do, not what we necessarily do on a day-to-day basis. I think that's important.
Let's talk about some of the folks that were an early influence on you in the fire service. You mentioned your father and the whole community of firefighters that you were raised around. When you got hired here at Metro, who were some of the folks who influenced you early on?
I've been fortunate. I've had a lot of good influences in my career. You could argue if you're looking for them, they're going to be there. But even my first captain, Captain Daw, kind of instilled a lot in the fire service. And it wasn't necessarily that he sat down and went, this is the way it is. It was just, you could tell by example, and you could see by the things that we were doing. So during probation, he was my captain, but he went into the academy the second half of my probation and was the drill master for 6-2. And another one that influenced me a lot was Joe Farica. He was kind of the substitute captain for a lot. At that time, he still did a lot of overtime. Not that he doesn't do it a lot now.
Right.
But it was Daw and Captain Farica both had kind of a similar outlook in that there's just simple things that we kind of take with us. Protect your first in. Run your own calls. Don't let somebody else do the work if you should be doing the work. Even if somebody else shows up first, if it's your first in, you should be the one that's there to clean up and to do, the overhaul, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it kind of left the impression that, it's the good old-fashioned work ethic of if there's work to be done, jump in and do it. So that was very influential, and I've worked with a lot of captains through the years that have left a very good impression. I'd already mentioned D-Ray down at 51. Mm-hmm. That was my first engine bid that I had for a short amount of time, and thankfully was successful in the next engineer's test, so I didn't get to work with him for a long time. And then when I promoted, Barthel was my captain. It was very nice to have a captain who had already been an engineer, and he was able to mentor, on some of the things. And even he presented it as, this is some of the things that I did as an engineer, not as if he was going, this is what you have to do. So it was nice to get that influence. And Fulcher, he promoted as a brand new captain, and it was nice that we had a little competition going on, because one of the things he said very early on was that he was not good at mapping. Mm-hmm. So I took that as a competition of going, all right, I need to try to get us to the call before he can, get ahead of the game and be on top of it. And for a little while it was. And then, of course, from that competition, of course, he stepped his game up and he became a lot better at mapping through that whole time. It's been very influential just to get that whole thing. And then down at 53, when we went down there, it was with Fulcher for a while, and then working with Craig Blevins and a younger crew at that point. It was nice to see a lot of younger people that were open to kind of either making changes or how to do things. One of the things I thought was very nice when Craig came in, we already had kind of a core crew together that had worked together for a while at that point. And when he came in, he kind of recognized and saw that, yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We were already doing what we were doing. And I was very fortunate to be able to work with Katsuyoshi for a while. Don't know how much needs to be said about Katsuyoshi, but if you work with him, you know that there's a lot to learn from that man. He's a wealth of knowledge. And then, of course, I enjoyed the time finishing up at 53 with you, and was with each captain, everybody had a little different approach and a little bit different, I don't want to say marching orders, but a different way of getting things done. And it was nice that everybody was very malleable, and we were able to have a great time while still performing at a high level through all the crew changes and all the captains that I've worked with. It's been a good time. It's been a fun ride.
And now that ride takes you out to Colorado.
Takes me out to Colorado. We'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to it. It's a small world, the fire service. The house that I ended up buying was previously owned by a retired firefighter, and the seller's agent lives in the area, and the agent is a volunteer firefighter in the area. So it's very interesting to go, it really is a small world.
We were speculating if they've signed you up for their volunteer department yet.
When I looked at the house, they were actually doing a drill that Saturday morning, so they haven't yet.
You just went through the retirement process.
Yes. I'm still going through.
I don't know if I've ever said anything that didn't get corrected. And rightfully so, rightfully so. What would you recommend to folks about retirement? Any initial impressions?
You know, everybody has their own, what makes sense for them. This was the right time for me. It was very nice that we had a barbecue at the station. It was great to see everybody there that came by and was able to stop by. It was good to see, we work a lot with the city crews down there, and A shift at 53, we've had a great relationship with them. So it's nice to see the city crews come through, the metro crews that were able to come through online. That was fantastic. A lot of people asked, do you miss it? And at that point I was like, no, this has been a great time. It's been a great run. I had to go to admin to pick up something a week and a half ago. Walked into admin, did what I did, and walked out of admin. People keep asking, do you miss it? Do you miss it? Right now, no. This was the right time for me. I hope everybody gets to that point. If money's a thing and money's important, I hope it works out for you. If you've got things to move on, I hope you're able to do those. I really feel that this has been a great career, and I loved it. I'm very proud to say that I was part of fill in the blank, Metro Fire 6-1, Station 53 for so long. But it's time for me to move on. I've seen the social media posts. At this point, I don't have the fear of missing out or like I'm missing out or anything. I hope that everybody gets to this point. I really do. To be able to retire, knock on wood, so far I'm healthy, I'm happy. The PERS retirement is there, and I'm looking forward to whatever comes next in life. I think it's great.
Anything else you want to talk about that you would like to share with the folks at Metro Fire?
Nothing earth-shattering. I mean, it's, the fire department is interesting in that we put so much on history and tradition. But we all know things are changing. We don't form bucket brigades anymore. We don't have chemical engines chemical steamers that are going down the road. We don't have horse-drawn fire engines. It's a time, when we started, the iPhone hadn't been invented. There was no such thing as that. I think for those of us that are around from that time still remember the station phone that was available to call your family, and that was it. One phone that you could call your family while you're on shift. Now, it's totally different with FaceTime and Zoom and the ability to keep in touch with your family and keep in touch with your loved ones at a moment's notice. I think it's good. So, while the history and tradition is there and we need to pay homage to it, we don't need to get so locked into that we let progress pass us by. So, yes, spend the time around the dinner table with the crew, but also don't be pissed at them because they're out in the app bay talking with their family for an hour, because that's important too. I don't know, enjoy your career.
All right, Metro Fire, that's Tim Barnes, who retired after 17 years of service. 17 years of service here at Metro Fire, which I think, to use Joel Greenfield's term, counts in dog years because he worked at the busiest stations throughout his time at Metro Fire. Thanks for joining us on Capture the Knowledge, and we'll see you next time.